All right, good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. I'm Hal Ginsberg. I really shouldn't say good afternoon, good morning, because people watch whenever they watch. So I got to kind of control that. When I did radio, of course, folks were listening in real time. So often now you're not. But I am just delighted to get to speak to you pretty much every day, and just starting an hour or so late this morning or today because I was really working on a lot of different stories, and I wanted to get some good video up for you folks and make sure I had some good visual aids for you. So let's start with the big story. I guess it's a big story. I really don't try. I try too hard not to focus overly much on Trump. I mean, I just don't really, whatever. I mean, he's just, it is what it is. I mean, he is who he is, and we know it. And I don't know really what more there is to discuss with respect to Trump. I mean, the ball is in the Democratic court. You get what you get with him. Kind of a clown, but a guy who's a narcissist, not serious about government, totally self-absorbed, did a lot of bad things, doesn't show, is clearly not concerned with others, sociopathic, like so many other politicians. I don't want to overstate it, but also did, pursued a few policies that really, in the end, probably were beneficial for the American people, including a more peaceful approach to foreign policy, less bellicose, less aggressive, and also attempts to bring back some good jobs to this country. Well, the latest news he can't be happy about. He was just found liable in New York City by a jury for $5 million to pay to Jean Carroll, who is a gossip columnist, I believe. Not really familiar with her. I think she is. The story covered by ABC News. And there was a really nice video I had poised to play for you with Stephanopoulos. And unfortunately, ABC replaced it with this video where they're interviewing her. So I'm not thrilled with it, but I'm going to play it anyway because we got to have some mixed media, right? Something besides just me talking. So here's Stephanopoulos and Jean Carroll and their interview this morning on Good Morning America. See if we can get this going. Here we go. I want to see if, there we are.
Thank you both for joining us this morning. How do you feel?
I feel fantastic. Yesterday was probably the happiest day of my life.
But it's been quite an ordeal, hasn't it?
In 4 years.
Only 4 years? I'm surprised you say it like that.
I only decided to come forward and tell what happened. I thought that was enough. And then he said terrible things about me, dragged me through the ground my face in the dirt. It was horrible. And so I talked to Robbie Kaplan, and Robbie and I brought lawsuit against Donald Trump. And yesterday, despite prosecutors and special counsels and investigators piling all these legal snarls up to Trump, it was this 5'3" wily female attorney and this elderly 79-year-old advice columnist who are finally holding Donald Trump liable.
Was there any point during the...
I'm going to stop it there because that's what happened. I mean, that's why it happened, right? I mean, you had a plaintiff who was charming, charismatic, and she went up against a particularly unlikable defendant who very likely was responsible for some kind of sexual assault against her at some time. That's why Trump was found liable. The fact that this guy could conceivably be reelected president, I'm not going to sit here and make it about him. That tells you just how weak, just how pathetic the Democratic Party is at this point. And I'm not going to blame voters. I'm simply not going to do it. I'm not going to blame voters in this case. We are looking at a political system that clearly, without any question, fails us repeatedly by providing us with virtually no options, with no good options when it comes to races, to elections. There were no good, well, and I don't want to overstate it. Let me put it this way. There were no good perceived as viable options in 2016 in the general election, and there were certainly no good viable options in 2020 in the perceived in the general election. That said, voters could have gone in a different direction in the Democratic primaries in both years, and they chose not to. So I do hold, if I'm going to hold anyone responsible, it's going to be the Democratic primary voters ultimately. Sure, the Democratic elites circled the wagons in support of Hillary in 2016 and Biden in 2020. And everybody dropped out. You keep hearing this from people like, not from people like Jimmy Dore and Breonna Joy Gray, but from Jimmy Dore and Breonna Joy Gray, complaining about how the Democratic establishment was all in for anyone but Bernie in 2020, and they got everyone to drop out except for Elizabeth Warren right after Super Tuesday, and she stayed in, and she took votes away from Bernie, and she made it absolutely impossible for Bernie to win. And I guess that's sort of true, kind of true, but look, the majority of Democratic voters in 2020 chose Joe Biden. Much as it pains me to admit it, much as I believe without any doubt at all that Bernie would have been a much, much better candidate against Trump and certainly a much better president than either Trump or Hillary. Look, Democratic primary voters, many of whom probably watch this program or who listened to me back in the day, preferred Hillary Clinton. So in the end, there was a kind of a Democratic with a small d primary in both those years. There doesn't look like there's going to be in this year, right? Because we're not even going to get to hear RFK Jr. or Marianne Williamson against Biden. Regardless, you had a choice. You had choices in 2016 and 2020. And frankly, you made the wrong choice. I don't know how else to look at it. So I'm very, very down on the Democratic primary voters for making just consistently bad decisions. In the latest cycle, Donald Trump is facing multiple legal attacks. He just was found liable of a sexual assault against E. Jean Carroll. Am I persuaded? Am I convinced he's responsible for it? No. I don't think this case should have ever seen the light of day. I don't think that anyone should be defending a suit that is based on events that occurred well over 20 years ago, unless there's a death, right? I mean, we certainly should be, there's no statute of limitations on murder, unless it's a child victim. And maybe there are good reasons why they didn't bring the suit earlier. But look, Trump, I'm not crying any tears for Trump. I'm going to get into why I think this was arguably a miscarriage of justice in a bit. But I'm not crying tears for Trump. He totally brought this on himself. It was his, and I was talking to my son about this. He just is so bellicose and he says such stupid things that I get why the jury found him liable, even though, and the standard, remember, is by a preponderance of evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, you couldn't find him liable beyond a reasonable doubt. But the first time any of these charges were made public were June of 2019. She claimed 2 people assaulted her. That's Carol, Trump and Les Moonves. And did they? Maybe. I don't know. Who do you know? We don't know. She put these in a book. Obviously, there was some value to the sales of that book, right? I mean, it can't possibly be that she was just interested when she published it. Does that mean she wasn't assaulted? No. But it does mean that she had a motive beyond simply exposing assailants, sexual predators. She had a motive that benefited her specifically to, increase the sales of her book. Obviously, otherwise she wouldn't put it in the book. So she had a rationale, an interest in you believing that she was sexually assaulted, or she ultimately claimed rape. She said she wasn't a victim. She said she fought back. And it may all be true, and I'm not saying it isn't. What I'm saying is that if you're going to hold somebody liable for a sexual assault or rape, I think you need some evidence. And I know there's this idea that we believe women, and I believe her. I do. I believe Jean Carroll. I think that she was probably sexually molested or raped or harassed or something, touched by Donald Trump against her wishes. I truly do believe that. Would I hold him liable? It'd be tough. It would be tough in this circumstances. We don't have a date. There's a reason we have statutes of limitations. The reason we have, and by the way, if you want to join me and you want to just tell me how I'm just a horrible person for saying any of this, please call in right now, 240-363-7190. I'm happy to talk to you. 240-363-7190. I remember hearing a Washington, D.C. guy, forget his name now, he used to do guest stints for Bill Press. And he was talking about Bill Cosby. And this guy was saying that there should be no statute of limitations for lawsuits or even for prosecution against people who are accused of sex crimes. There shouldn't be. Even if the sex crime is against an adult and it occurred 20 years ago, there shouldn't be any, you should be able to charge that person, you should be able to sue that person. I was just really upset about that. Look, I'm a lawyer. I was trained as a lawyer. It's really important, if you want to live in a free society, that you can't simply be held liable for something where the evidence, where you can't, let me say it this way, where you can't have due process, where you can't defend yourself effectively. That's why we have statutes of limitations. And we can go through it. Memories fade. Evidence is often ephemeral. It can disappear at any time. Witnesses die. Their memories aren't what they used to be, or they remember things differently than they might have happened. There are a million different factors at play that make it much more difficult to prove a case or to defend a case, frankly, if time has passed beyond a certain point. I think this is kind of obvious. That's why we have statute of limitations. We don't for murder for several reasons. One is, of course, it's the ultimate crime. We recognize that if you take a life, then you should never be able to rest easy that you won't be prosecuted for it. I think that's a really important factor and one I completely agree with. Another reason, though, is that to bring a charge of murder, you generally need a body, right? You need to be able to provide some type of forensic evidence, some something beyond a statement by a witness. You have to at least prove death. I don't believe you need a corpse, but you have to prove death. You have to have somebody say, I saw that person's bullet-ridden body. I saw the person die. Now, the body might disappear. Maybe somebody puts it in a crematorium. But you do have some evidence of death. So there is always external evidence beyond simply a statement of some sort. Well, you could have the statement that you saw the person's body, but generally, then you'd also, no one's seen that person for a long time. Maybe there's blood. There's something that confirms the death. But in a case of assault, sexual or otherwise, a victim's statement can be sufficient. So it ultimately boils down to who struck John. The complaining witness in this case, Jean Carroll, does not remember the date. She said the assault by Trump occurred at Bergdorf Goodman's department store sometime in late 95, early 96. Trump said he never met her before. Trump made a lot of really stupid statements. Trump opened himself up to this lawsuit. Trump should never be president. Trump demonstrated in the way he responded, his vindictiveness, his immaturity. He should not be president. Why would you insult her? Why would you say some of the things he said? And I wish I had the quotes from Stephanopoulos earlier, but she's not my type. Right? I mean, what? Just keep your friggin' mouth shut. If I'm your lawyer, I'm like, shut the F up. No, you're bringing attention to this that you don't need to do. But he did all of that. He made himself as unlikable as he can be in a place where he's particularly disliked, which is Manhattan, where the lawsuit was filed. He made himself as liable by his statements, I believe, as anything that E. Jean Carroll said about him. Now, this case, if you look at it closely, there's a lot of things that look really, really bad about it that kind of smell funny. If I'm the lawyer for Donald Trump, I'm going to be saying, hey, she doesn't know what date. How am I going to prove my client wasn't at Bergdorf Goodman? Couldn't have been. Maybe he was away on business. The date that she claims the assault occurred, maybe he was out of town. But I don't have any hotel records because it's been 20 plus years since this occurred. Moreover, I don't even know what date she says it happened. So I can't prove it didn't happen because I'd have to prove a negative. I could prove that he wasn't there if I knew what date it was, maybe, but I don't know what date it was. I could go interview the people at Bergdorf Goodman department store and say, do you remember if Donald Trump ever went into the store that day? Do you remember him coming into the store at all at that period of time? Presumably, they'd recognize him. I think he was a pretty regular customer. It's a high-end department store near where he lived, near the Trump Tower. So presumably, they would have known if he went in. They would have recognized him. Did they? You can't defend a lawsuit if you don't even know what day it occurred. And then also, there's some other issues that make this look kind of weird. I think normally you have a battery, the lawsuit statute of limitations on battery charges is 5 years. That's what it is in the District of Columbia. It may be 10 in some places. There's the discovery rule. So if you don't discover the assault, you don't discover the battery, whatever it is, the tort, until, a few years have passed, then the statute of limitations starts to run. It's told. If you don't reasonably know, like let's say you were knocked unconscious or something and you didn't know about it or whatever, something prevented you from learning of the circumstances that provided you with a cause of action, the statute is told for that period of time. But nothing like that happened here. Her claim is she fought back at the time. She knew who he was. She recognized him when he walked into Bergdorf as she was walking out, and then went into the dressing room with him, and he assaulted her in there. Is that plausible? Maybe, I don't know. It doesn't sound that totally credible to me that someone would she says rape in a dressing room at Bergdorf. I mean, it could happen. It seems unlikely, but possible. Sure. But would anyone have noticed? Did anyone remember Jean Carroll leaving the store all upset, all in a was there a salesperson? She was a well-known person too. She was a celebrity too. She's a gossip columnist for, I think, the Daily News. Did anyone say, oh, boy, she ran out of here in a hurry? Maybe, but we don't have those witnesses. So how did Trump find himself liable? Well, he claimed she made it up. He said, she's not my type. And that looked really bad because he had also testified at deposition that she looked so much like his wife at the time. I believe his wife at the time, Merle Maples, maybe they were divorced by then or separated. I don't know. He thought Carol was Merle Maples, his ex-wife or his wife. So, I mean, Trump's a jackass. I wouldn't find somebody liable on a claim that happened 20 plus years earlier. I think she said in 2019, she made public the statement. Now a couple of people came forward and said she had told them around the time of the alleged assault that she had been victimized by Trump and Moonves. But they hadn't come forward. So, I mean, that adds to her credibility. Like I said, I think she probably did it, but I think she probably was telling the truth and Trump probably did sexually assault her. But these suits shouldn't be brought. Just not right. And as I said, it looks a little funny. So, like I said, the statute of limitations usually 5, maybe 10 years for assault. In New York, what happened was and it's weird. I mean, this is what I'm saying. All this, I don't know all the backstory. Maybe I need to investigate it, find out. For some strange I don't know what happened. In New York State, the legislature passed a law, which the Governor Hochul at the time signed, changed the statute of limitations. This is, there's supposed to not be suits where you can just specifically target one person. Attainder, bills of attainder. Laws that are designed to target one individual as a bill of attainder. Those are unconstitutional. I presume that this change in the New York State law was not a bill of attainder. It wasn't designed to make it possible to sue Donald Trump for sexual assault. But this was a few years after E. Jean Carroll that the state passed the law. It amended the statute of limitations for just 1 year. It allowed alleged victims, to file lawsuits for 1 year. They had 1 year window. And it also, what I found really interesting about this law is that she filed her lawsuit immediately as soon as the law was changed and added the battery to the defamation charge. The defamation charge was when he said, she's not my type, I never met her, and dismissed her allegation against him. But then she was able to expand the charge, which obviously brought her a lot more money in the end. It's kind of weird because, for another reason, the law, which I didn't put in here, unfortunately, of course I didn't add it to my slide, the law provided that courts were supposed to accelerate or prioritize claims that were brought under that statute. It said if you bring a claim that would otherwise be barred by the statute of limitations during that window between 2022 and 2023. If you do that, then the courts are supposed to accelerate the process, move them forward more quickly. And I presume that at least the sensible reason for that is they're old and the evidence is already getting stale if it isn't already moldy and rotten. So let's get these cases done as quickly as possible. That makes some sense. But still, it looks like we're trying to get somebody. That is how it looks to me. And of course, Trump totally played into it in every respect. So look, I don't care. But I have problems with justice of this sort, where a lawsuit that previously would not have been permitted, that was clearly time barred, where the plaintiff made the allegations at a time when it was clearly to her advantage to do so, even notwithstanding the fact that at that time it was time barred, but it was clearly in her interest. She made it public to, and whether she did it to sell her book or not, clearly it had the impact of helping her sell her book. So I can't be feeling, oh yeah, this is justice. I don't see that. My question to you, is this going to hurt Trump in the 2024 primary season against DeSantis? Is this going to hurt Trump in the general, assuming he's the nominee, against Biden? 240-363-7190, 240-363-7190. You see it on that little oval there. I was interested, given what I was talking about yesterday, how Trump will benefit from the fact that the Democrats aren't holding primaries. That this is an advantage to him for two reasons. One, it's an advantage to him because Joe Biden is not going to get seasoned by debates. He's not going to get prepped. Assuming he is the nominee, regardless of whether there are debates, he will not have the, getting, I don't want to say touched up. He'll be going into debates green. That won't be the case with Trump. Trump will be debating DeSantis and Nikki Haley and others. He may lose. But if he's able to, right now it looks like he's going to win. DeSantis is slipping in the polls. Haley's an afterthought. Do you think the suit hurts him? I don't see that. A.B. Stoddard, who writes for Real Clear Politics, never heard of this guy, is livid right now. He's waxing wroth because CNN is going to air a town hall in New Hampshire tonight with New Hampshire undecided voters. And Stoddard makes the point that this isn't fair to Biden, that Biden will hide as a ubiquitous Trump is normalized. Stoddard makes the point that Trump is different than other former presidents and other candidates because of his because of what happened in January 6th, and because Stoddard calls him a serial liar and goes on and says he's different than other presidents. Well, I've addressed that. I don't think he's that much different than other presidents. I don't think he's the worst president of the 21st century or the third millennium, whichever one you want to go with. I don't see that. I do think January 6th makes a difference. I think it's relevant. I think it's a reason he should not be reelected. I think it puts him in the discussion of some of the worst presidents of all time. I wouldn't have put him in the discussion. I wouldn't have put him in the bottom 5 where maybe he is, but definitely not the worst. The January 6th actions, the riot, whatever term you want to use, I don't think it was, I've called it an insurrection as part of my job in the past. I don't think it really was an insurrection. I don't see it that way. But Trump was close to trying. I mean, if he was, maybe, yeah. I mean, he wanted to stay president, and he had been voted out of office, and that's really, really awful. Whatever you want to call it, it's really, really anti-democratic. That said, he is a former president. He's having a town hall. It is newsworthy. I don't object to CNN necessarily holding this town hall and televising it, but for the fact that they've done everything possible in the past 2 election cycles to hide Bernie, to keep you from hearing Bernie. They've interrupted any time Bernie's been getting interviewed to go to Trump, to go to somebody else. I don't have a problem with CNN having a town hall with Trump, but for the fact that they're not going to have debates with Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. And as far as I know, they haven't interviewed either of them. I think there was an interview. There was an interview by Hannity with Williamson, and Carlson interviewed RFK Jr. just before Carlson was fired. I'm trying to remember because they MSNBC. Okay, so this is what happened. MSNBC, and I didn't watch this interview because they just simply excised parts of, or maybe it was ABC, one of them or other. They excised sections of the interview with RFK Jr. where he talked about the vaccines. So if you're going to have a town hall with Trump, with undecided voter, if you're going to give him, and is it a gift? I mean, it is newsworthy. I guess it's kind of a gift. I mean, you could cover it without actually holding it. My big issue is they are treating Trump not differently. Stoddard's saying they should treat Trump differently from every other candidate and not hold the town hall because of that. I'm saying that by holding the town hall, they're treating him differently. That's the problem. They're not giving progressives, they've never given progressive challengers anywhere near the amount of time, the amount of coverage that they give Trump and that they've given other more moderate corporate type candidates. That's the problem. That's what we need to decry. That's what's anti-democratic. That's what's incredibly upsetting about all of this, is that the corporate media is not letting you hear from progressives. They're only letting you hear from center and center right and right wing candidates, extremists. That's what the problem is. All right, 240-363-7190 if you want to join me. Love to talk to you. 240-363-7190. The race for this is interesting. So the race for senator in 2 important states, the race for Senate, U.S. Senate in 2 important states is going to be hot because of retirements. That will be next year. And in California, we'll focus. I will talk about Maryland on another program and hopefully have some guests. But in California, a long-time fixture in the Senate and in California politics, going back to the 70s, going back to San Francisco in the 70s, Diane Feinstein will be retiring next year. She's 89 years old. Many of us believe she should have been retired years ago. And you are hearing from two progressives in Congress who say, hey, would you just step down, Diane? It's been long enough. You're 89. And, you haven't been available for voters. You haven't been available for votes. And the Senate needs you. So since you can't seem to do your job, maybe you should stop doing it. You should just simply retire. And I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, it makes sense to me. I agree with that sentiment in general. If you can't do your job, then you should step down. But why would anyone think she would? She's been in government for close to 50 years. Starting, I think, with the San Francisco City Council in the mid to late 70s. Maybe it was 75, I don't know. Around when George Moscone and Harvey Milk were big names. Harvey Milk murdered, of course, and I think she took advantage of his murder and bolstered her own name through that tragedy. I don't know why anyone would think that Diane Feinstein would step down. She ran when she was 83, and people knew, Californians knew at that time that she would be 89 or 90 when her term was up, and they still voted for her. I find no one else to blame for this situation besides the Democratic voters in 2018 who reelected her. I just simply, folks, you have to look at alternatives. You can't simply return ancient, calcified politicians like Joe Biden, like Diane Feinstein, term after term. People who have demonstrated they're not on your side. You have alternatives. As much as I dislike the Democratic Party, it has given you better choices than Diane Feinstein and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. It has done that. So look, I don't beat up on Republican voters who voted for, or people who voted for Donald Trump in the general election, because I don't think the alternatives were better. But there were better alternatives in 2018. I don't know where they're worse. Kevin DeLeon, he was the Democratic Party of California endorsed Kevin DeLeon. That's how bad that's how past her cell date, they viewed Diane Feinstein at that point. That she simply wasn't capable of serving out another 6-year term based on her age, based on her mental state. There were much better. I don't think Kevin DeLeon was a good choice. Kevin DeLeon has demonstrated he's short-tempered. Now this all came out later. He was cursing out people, apparently using racial slurs in LA. This is awful. But you had a choice. Allison Hartson, a genuine progressive, a genuine dyed-in-the-wool, true progressive option in 2018. If you live in California, and I know a lot of my viewers, a lot of my audience is from California, you had a real alternative, and you didn't choose her. So really, who do you have to blame but yourself?
Diane Feinstein is worth $80 million. Her husband is a billionaire. Income inequality isn't the problem for her, it's the solution. Diane Feinstein voted for the Bush tax cuts and to repeal the estate tax. Diane, how many tax cuts are you going to give yourself? Diane Feinstein is never going to fix this problem because she is the problem. I'm going to represent you, not the wealthy elite. I'm Allison Hartson, and I approve this message because I'm going to get money and Diane Feinstein out of politics.
All right, so there's Allison Hartson running in 2018. That's a great ad that she ran, incredibly powerful, and she just got thumped. So again, who's to blame? If voters won't go for the most progressive candidate, I don't like the Democrats. I get not voting for Democrats. I get looking for anywhere but the Democratic Party for a candidate. I understand all of that. But that doesn't absolve you of the responsibility when voting in a Democratic primary or to vote. Doesn't absolve you of the responsibility to vote in a Democratic primary when you have an option like Allison Hartson. And I mean, where were voters? Where do you have your head? Obviously it's stuck right up your butt if you're not going to vote for Allison Hartson for senator. And it was a top 2, so you wanted to get her in the top 2. It wasn't like you had to vote for her. You had to vote for DeLeon because you wanted to stop Feinstein, right? I mean, there's the argument, well, it's the lesser of two evils and the better candidate can't win, so I got to vote for Hartson. I got to vote for DeLeon because Hartson can't win. No, because it was a top 2. So you're voting for Hartson doesn't help, doesn't mean that you're helping Feinstein. As long as you don't give Feinstein your vote and she doesn't get to 50%, you're fine. So there was no excuse not to vote in 2018 for Allison Hartson. There's going to be an election next year in California. If you're voting in California, if you're a Democrat, and I think you should register as a Democrat, much as I can't stand the Democrats, but if there isn't a viable Green, and you can always vote for the Green, by the way, you can always vote for the Green in the general. So that's my advice. If there's a Green, vote for the Green, unless there's a really good Democrat, which is unlikely. Next year, oh, and there goes my phone, which is unfortunately, let's see if I can read it. What is that thing ringing? Can't even find this. That's so bad. All right, I apologize, folks. That is not supposed to happen. Yeah, I'm still streaming, right? Hope so. You've got Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, and Barbara Lee running. I think they're all flawed. They all voted for Hakeem Jeffries to be the minority leader in the House. That's a huge problem. It's a huge, huge issue. They shouldn't have. Barbara Lee has been a bit of a disappointment. She's still clearly the most progressive of those 3. Katie Porter, 2, Schiff, the worst. If you vote for Adam Schiff, then you're going to get what you deserve. There are alternatives besides Democratic establishment corrupt leaders. And that is exactly who Adam Schiff is. So I'm going to leave this video, I'm going to leave this live stream with this message. Don't vote for Adam Schiff in the Democratic, well, it's not a Democrat primary, in the quote jungle, unquote primary. Don't vote for Adam Schiff. And if Schiff is one of the final 2, don't vote for him. Don't vote for Schiff. He personifies the link between, and this is what Bronco Marketic or something said, he personifies the link between hawks and deep-pocketed defense contractors. He's never voted against a war. His impeachment of Trump was based on the fact that Trump held up a sale of arms that hurt one of Schiff's contributors. Don't vote for Adam Schiff. Have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow.